The room went silent when Nigeria's wealthiest man walked into the press conference wearing torn slippers and a faded shirt. Adebayo Ogunlade, 62 years old, stood before 50 cameras with his head slightly bowed, his once proud shoulders now curved under an invisible weight. His dark skin, usually glowing with expensive skincare, looked ashen and dry. The gray in his thick beard had spread like wildfire. His eyes, bloodshot and tired, scanned the shocked faces of journalists who had covered his empire for decades. The smell of old sweat mixed with cheap soap hung around him, a scent nobody associated with the man who owned half of Lagos. "I am bankrupt," he said, his deep voice cracking like thunder before rain. "Ogunlade Pharmaceuticals has collapsed. My accounts are frozen. My properties are being seized. I have nothing left." The cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters shouted questions, but Adebayo raised one wrinkled hand for silence. His wedding ring was gone. He'd already sold it. His expensive watch, gone. Even his dignity seemed to have been auctioned off to the highest bidder. He walked off the stage slowly, his torn slippers making a shuffling sound that echoed in the silent hall. Outside, his rusted taxi waited. Not a Rolls-Royce. A taxi. Within hours, the video went viral. Social media exploded. His wife Ngozi, 45, light-skinned, draped in designer scarves, was on the next flight to London before sunset. She didn't pack his things. She didn't say goodbye. His 3 children from his second marriage, Tunde, 32, a banker, Chiamaka, 29, a fashion influencer, and Emeka, 26, a lawyer, released a joint statement disowning him. They blocked his number. They changed their last names on Instagram. The mansion in Ikoyi was locked. The man who built an empire was now alone in a one-room flat in Ajagunle, with peeling paint and a ceiling fan that barely turned. But there was one person Adebayo hadn't expected to hear from. Folake Ogunlade, 23 years old, his firstborn daughter, the child he had blamed for his first wife's death. The girl he had sent away to boarding school at age 6 and barely spoken to since. She was tall and lean, with her mother's soft eyes and her father's stubborn jaw. Her natural hair was pulled into a simple bun. She wore an old University of Lagos t-shirt and jeans with a hole in the knee. Her hands were rough from washing dishes at a campus restaurant where she worked part-time to survive. She had been surviving without him for years, and now she was coming back. She stood outside his door in Ajagunle on a Saturday morning, holding 2 plastic bags of rice, beans, and vegetables. The street was loud with generators humming and children playing football in the dust. The smell of frying plantains and open gutters filled the hot air. She knocked 3 times. Silence. Then shuffling footsteps. The door creaked open. Adebayo's face appeared, thinner, older, shocked. "Folake!" His voice was barely a whisper. She nodded. "I brought food, Daddy." He stared at her like she was a ghost. His lips trembled. He wanted to say something, but shame choked the words in his throat. She stepped inside without waiting for permission. The room was small, dark, and smelled of loneliness. A single mattress on the floor, a plastic chair, a table with a cracked leg. No AC, no fridge, just heat and silence. Folake set the bags on the table and looked at him. "When last did you eat?" she asked. He didn't answer. His eyes were wet, but no tears fell. "I don't need your pity," he muttered. She turned to face him fully, her voice calm but firm. "I didn't come here because I pity you. I came because you're my father." He sank onto the mattress, his hands covering his face, and for the first time in 23 years, Adebayo Ogunlade wept in front of his daughter. Folake returned every weekend. She brought food, medicine for his high blood pressure, and soap. She never asked him for money. She never complained. She simply showed up. On her 3rd visit, she found him sitting in the dark, staring at the wall. The heat was unbearable. Sweat poured down his face. "Why do you keep coming?" he asked without looking at her. She was stirring a pot of jollof rice on the small kerosene stove. The smell of tomatoes, onions, and spices filled the room. "Because nobody else will," she said simply. He turned his head slowly. "You should hate me." She paused, then continued stirring. "Maybe I should, but I don't." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his voice heavy with regret. "Your mother died because of you." The words hung in the air like smoke. Folake's hand froze on the spoon. She had heard those words before, whispered by housemaids, muttered by relatives, screamed by him during her childhood. But now hearing them again in this tiny room, they felt different. She turned off the stove and sat on the plastic chair across from him. "My mother died giving me life," she said quietly. "That's not the same thing as me killing her." Her eyes were calm, but her voice carried a strength that made him look away. "You blamed a child for something she couldn't control." Adebayo's jaw tightened. "I loved her more than anything." Folake nodded. "I know, and I've spent my whole life paying for that love." Silence filled the room again, thick and uncomfortable. Outside, a woman was shouting at her children. A radio played Afrobeat music. Life continued, loud and messy, while inside this room, two broken people sat in the ruins of the past. "I don't want your forgiveness," he finally said. Folake stood and served the rice onto two plates. "Good, because I'm not here to give it. I'm here because it's the right thing to do." She handed him a plate. He stared at it, then at her, and for the first time he saw his daughter, not as the ghost of his dead wife, but as a person, a strong, stubborn, impossible person, just like him. While Folake scrubbed her father's floors and paid his rent with money she earned from washing dishes, his other children were thriving in their denial. Tunde posted photos from a yacht party in Dubai. Chimaka launched a new clothing line and gave interviews about cutting toxic people from your life. Amika appeared on a podcast discussing financial responsibility and how some people deserve their downfall. None of them mentioned their father by name, but everyone knew. The comments sections were brutal. "Your father built your life and you abandoned him," someone wrote. Chimaka deleted the comment and blocked the user. Ngozi, his wife of 15 years, was living in a Knightsbridge penthouse funded by money she'd secretly moved to offshore accounts years ago. She gave an interview to a British magazine, her face perfectly made up, her voice dripping with false sadness. "I loved Adebayo, but I couldn't watch him destroy himself," she said, dabbing her dry eyes with a silk handkerchief. "Sometimes love means walking away." The interviewer nodded sympathetically. Nobody asked why she took the money. Nobody questioned why she never looked back. She was the victim in her own story, and the world believed her because she told it beautifully. Back in Ajagunla, Folake's phone buzzed constantly. Messages from cousins, aunties, family friends, all asking the same question. "Why are you wasting your time on him?" One message came from Chiamaka herself. "He never loved you. Why are you embarrassing yourself?" Folake read it, then put her phone away. She didn't respond. What could she say? That love isn't always about what you receive, but about who you choose to be. That forgiveness isn't weakness, but the hardest form of strength. They wouldn't understand. They had never had to choose between bitterness and grace. So she chose silence and continued showing up. Every single weekend. Without fail. Adebayo's health was failing. His blood pressure spiked. His hands shook when he tried to drink water. One evening, Folake arrived to find him collapsed on the floor, barely conscious. She screamed for help. Neighbors rushed in. They carried him to her borrowed car, a friend's old Camry with a rattling engine. She drove through Lagos traffic, honking, weaving, praying. The hospital smelled of disinfectant and desperation. Nurses moved slowly. "Do you have money for admission?" one asked, her voice flat with exhaustion. Folake emptied her purse. It wasn't enough. She called her roommate, borrowed more, begged the doctor to start treatment. He finally agreed, shaking his head. Adebayo woke up 2 days later in a ward with 6 other patients. The ceiling was stained yellow. A fan creaked overhead. Folake was asleep in a plastic chair beside his bed, her head resting on her folded arms. Her phone was clutched in her hand. She'd been texting friends, asking for financial help, selling her textbooks online to raise money for his medication. He watched her for a long time. Her face was peaceful in sleep, but her clothes were wrinkled, her lips chapped. She looked exhausted. She looked like she was carrying the world. And she was. She was carrying him. When she woke, their eyes met. "You sold your books," he said. It wasn't a question. She stretched, her bones cracking. "I can borrow notes from classmates." He turned his face toward the stained ceiling. "You should be studying for exams, not babysitting a dying old man." She reached for the cup of water on the side table and helped him drink. "You're not dying, and I already rescheduled my exams." His throat tightened. Why? He whispered. She set the cup down gently. Because you're my father, and because someone has to show you what love looks like, even if you forgot. Her words hit him like a hammer to the chest. And in that crowded, noisy hospital ward, Adebayo Ogunlade realized he had spent 23 years punishing the wrong person. Late one night, after the hospital discharged him, Adebayo sat on his mattress staring at an old photograph. It was creased and faded, a picture of his first wife, Amara. She was 25 in the photo, wearing a yellow dress, her smile bright as sunshine. Her eyes were kind. Her hand rested on her pregnant belly. Folake walked in with a bag of bread and eggs and saw him holding it. She froze. He had never spoken about her mother. Ever. Now tears rolled down his weathered face. She was everything, he said, his voice breaking. And when she died, I died too. Folake sat beside him slowly, carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. Tell me about her, she said softly. He inhaled shakily. She laughed at everything, even my terrible jokes. She wanted to name you Folake, wealth to care for. She said you would be a blessing. He laughed bitterly. I turned that blessing into a curse. Folake's eyes glistened. She was right, though. I do care. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw Amara's kindness in her face, Amara's strength in her posture, Amara's love in her actions. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. I know, Folake said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. But saying sorry isn't enough, Daddy. You have to let go of the anger. You have to stop punishing me for surviving. He nodded, his shoulders shaking with sobs. Outside, rain began to fall, heavy, cleansing, loud against the tin roof. The room smelled of wet earth and new beginnings. For the first time in 2 decades, father and daughter cried together, not in bitterness, not in blame, but in the slow, painful process of healing. And in that moment, Amara's ghost finally rested, because the 2 people she loved most in the world were finally learning to love each other. 3 months later, Folake was at the market buying vegetables when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. Miss Ogunlade, a man's voice said, professional, serious. This is Barrister Akinwell. I represent your father's legal team. We need to meet, urgently. Her heart dropped. Was he dying? Had something happened? She rushed to the address he gave, a towering glass building in Victoria Island. The receptionist led her to a conference room. 5 lawyers sat around a mahogany table, documents everywhere. Her father sat at the head of the table, but he looked different. He wore a sharp navy suit. His beard was trimmed. His eyes were clear, strong, calculating. He looked like the billionaire he'd always been. What's going on? Folake asked, confusion flooding her face. Barrister Akinwell stood. Miss Folake, your father was never bankrupt. It was a test. The words didn't make sense. She looked at Adebayo. He met her gaze without flinching. I staged everything, he said calmly. The press conference, the collapse, the poverty. I wanted to see who truly loved me and who only loved my money. The room spun. Folake grabbed the edge of the table. You lied? Her voice was barely audible. For 3 months, I sold my books, worked double shifts, skipped meals, and it was all a lie? Adebayo stood, walking toward her. I had to know. Folake stepped back, her face twisted in shock and betrayal. You tested me? Like I was some kind of experiment? Her voice rose. I gave up everything. I fought for you when everyone else ran. And it was all fake? The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Adebayo reached for her hand. She slapped it away. Don't touch me. Tears poured down her face. Not sad tears, but furious ones. You want to know who loves you? Nobody, Daddy. Because love isn't something you test. It's something you trust. And you just destroyed the only real thing you had left. She turned and walked out, her footsteps echoing in the cold, empty hallway. The door slammed, and Adebayo stood frozen, realizing he had won his test, but lost his daughter. For 2 weeks, Folake didn't answer his calls. She blocked his number, returned to campus, threw herself into her studies with a fury that scared her friends. She didn't cry. She didn't talk about it. She just worked, studied, existed. But inside she was shattered. How could he do that? How could he turn her love into a game? Every memory of those 3 months now felt contaminated. The hospital, the rice she cooked, the rent she paid, the nights she stayed awake worrying. All of it had been a performance, not hers, his, and she had been the fool. Meanwhile, Adebayo sat in his restored mansion, surrounded by wealth and emptiness. Ngozi had tried to return, crying, apologizing. He had his lawyers throw her out. Tunde, Chimaka, and Emeka came crawling back, claiming they always believed in him. He looked at them with disgust. "Get out of my house," he said coldly. "You're not my children. You're vultures." They protested, argued, threatened legal action. He didn't care. His lawyers handled it. He changed his will, cut them off completely. They screamed. They cried. They called him insane. He felt nothing, because the only person whose reaction mattered wasn't there. He sat in his study one night, staring at the document his lawyer had prepared. The Lagos Testament, his new will. Everything went to Folake, the company, the properties, the accounts, billions of naira. But what did it matter if she never spoke to him again? He had wanted to test loyalty, and he'd found it. But in finding it, he'd broken it. The cruelest irony of all. His phone rang. "Unknown number." He answered. "Mr. Ogunlade," a doctor's voice. "Your daughter was in an accident. She's at Lagos University Teaching Hospital. You need to come now." The phone slipped from his hand, and for the second time in his life, Adebayo Ogunlade felt true, paralyzing fear. But was this really the end? Adebayo arrived at the hospital at midnight, his driver breaking every speed limit. He ran through the halls, his expensive shoes slipping on polished floors. He found her in the emergency ward, her head bandaged, her arm in a cast. She was conscious, arguing with a nurse about discharge forms. "I'm fine, I can go home," she insisted. Then she saw him. Her face hardened. "What are you doing here?" He stopped at the foot of her bed, breathless. "They called me. They said, I put you as my emergency contact years ago," she interrupted, "before I knew what kind of man you really were. I'll change it." The nurse left quietly, sensing the tension. Adebayo moved closer. "Folake, please." "Please what?" she snapped. "Please forgive you for turning my love into a social experiment? Please pretend that what you did was okay?" She tried to sit up, winced from the pain. He reached to help. She pushed him away. "I don't need your help. I never did. You needed mine, and I gave it freely. But you couldn't accept that, could you? You had to test it, to prove it, to control it." Her voice cracked. "Do you know how that feels? To realize that the hardest thing you've ever done meant nothing?" Adebayo sank into the chair beside her bed, his face in his hands. "It meant everything," he said, his voice muffled. "That's why I did it, because I needed to know it was real." Folake laughed bitterly. "Real? You want real? Real is me choosing you over my education. Real is me going hungry so you could eat. Real is me loving you, even though you spent my entire life hating me. That's real, Daddy. And you spat on it." Silence filled the room. Outside, an ambulance siren wailed. Life and death, constantly circling. Finally, Adebayo looked up. "I'm giving you everything. The company, the money, all of it. It's yours." Folake stared at him. "You still don't get it," she said, her voice soft now, sad. "I never wanted your money. I wanted my father." She turned her face away. "But I don't think he exists anymore. Maybe he never did." Those words hit harder than any slap, any curse, any punishment. Adebayo stood slowly. "I'll prove to you he does," he said, "even if it takes the rest of my life." He walked to the door, paused. "Your mother would be proud of who you've become. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." He left, and Folake, alone in that hospital bed, finally let herself cry. Not for him, but for the childhood she never had, and the father she was still learning to forgive. Or was there something darker waiting to be revealed? 6 months passed. Adebayo didn't call, didn't text, didn't force anything. Instead, he acted. He established the Amara Ogunlade Foundation in his late wife's name, dedicated to helping single parents and orphan children. He volunteered at schools in Ajagunle, teaching kids about business. He sold his mansion, downsized to a comfortable home, gave millions to charity. People were shocked. The media called it redemption, but he didn't do it for them. He did it because Folake had shown him what real wealth looked like, and it had nothing to do with money. One Saturday morning, Folake received an envelope at her campus hostel. Inside was a handwritten letter on simple paper. No fancy letterhead, no lawyer language. Just his handwriting. Folake, I cannot undo the past. I cannot give you back the childhood I stole. But I can spend every remaining day showing you that love is not a test. It's a choice. I choose you. Not because you passed some game, but because you are my daughter, and you are the best thing I ever created. The company is yours if you want it. But more than that, I hope one day I can be the father you deserved all along. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance. Daddy, she read it 3 times, folded it, put it in her drawer. 2 weeks later, she showed up at his new house. Smaller, simpler, warmer. He opened the door, surprise and hope flooding his face. I'm not here to move in, she said. I'm not here to say everything's okay. But maybe we can try. Slowly. He nodded, his eyes wet. Slowly, he agreed. They sat on his small veranda, drank tea, talked about her exams, her dreams, her mother. For the first time, they talked like family. Not perfect, not healed completely, but trying. And that was enough. Because some testimonies aren't written in wills or bank accounts. They're written in the quiet moments when 2 broken people choose to rebuild. Together. Love is not found in what people say when you're on top. It's found in who stays when you hit the bottom. What would you have done if you were in Folake's shoes? Have you ever been tested by someone you loved? Do you believe people can truly change? Or is forgiveness just another way to get hurt again? Share your story in the comments below. Let's talk about the real meaning of family. Share your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if you believe people can truly change, smash that like button. Subscribe for more powerful stories like this. You won't regret it.